At this time, would like to invite Senator John McCain to say a few words.
Good afternoon. I'm pleased to be back here in Halifax at this very important gathering, and I'm accompanied by some of my colleagues in the House and Senate, Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia, Senator Susan Collins of Maine, Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming, and Congressman Adam Kinzinger of the state of Illinois. As always, we engaged in spirited discussions. We enjoyed panels, and we look forward to the rest of the agenda tomorrow. In the 5 years that I have attended this conference, I have not seen as many issues confronting the world as we have discussed here today. The panel that I participated in concerning Syria was very interesting, and I must say that because of Syria and other things, the United States' influence, in my view, is diminishing and has been diminished and continues to wane, not only in the Middle East but around the world. The news today that China will now be basically requiring permission for aircraft to come into parts of the South China Sea is a very provocative act, and one that will cause an increase in tensions between China and Japan, but also between China and the United States because of our commitment to freedom of the seas. In Syria, these conditions are worsening. The belief that somehow that with a Geneva meeting with Bashar on the winning side and the momentum on his side, that he will somehow agree to leave Syria peacefully is just pure fantasy. And we also had spirited discussions about the Israeli-Palestinian peace process and other issues. So I look forward to answering your questions, and turn to Senator Kaine for his remarks and my other colleagues, and then we'll respond to questions.
I want to thank Senator McCain for leading this CODEL. This visit is about relationships. It's about the relationships between those of us who work in Congress. The better we know each other, the more time we spend together, the better decisions we make, but it's also about the relationships we have with our allies around the world. This forum has done a superb job in a brief life of 5 years of bringing together top quality people so that we can grapple with difficult issues. These issues are difficult, as Senator McCain indicated. Maybe the only thing I'll say prior to questions is yesterday the forum kicked off with a video that included footage of President Kennedy's speech to American University, the commencement speech in June of 1963. And it made me go pull that speech and take a look at it, and it's interesting how prescient Senator Kennedy was at that, President Kennedy was at that time. He was talking about challenges with an enemy, a global enemy, the Soviet Union. He was talking about talks in Geneva that many folks thought should not be going forward, talking about the wisdom of partial deals or deals in steps versus comprehensive deals. He was talking about the difficulty of believing in peace in a world that seemed so dangerous, and yet he challenged the realist in all of us to recognize that peace is possible. It is difficult, but possible, and that enmities that exist between nations decades later, suddenly they don't exist because the world has a way of throwing surprises at us. But it doesn't happen by accident. It happens by that relationship building and creativity. And that's why we come to a forum like Halifax, so that we can return with better ideas and better relationships. And I was happy to be part of this delegation.
I'm Senator Susan Collins from the great state of Maine, a neighbor of Canada's. So I have been to Canada many times, but this is the first opportunity I've had to attend the Halifax International Security Forum. I want to thank Senator John McCain and Senator Tim Kaine for leading our delegation. This has been an excellent conference. I've attended many national security conferences over the years, and I would certainly have to rank this among the very best. It has provided the opportunity for detailed, in-depth person-to-person discussions on a host of foreign policy challenges facing our country. I am particularly concerned that we're meeting as negotiations are going on between the U.S. government and the Iranian government. I'm very concerned about what the outcome of those negotiations might be, in that I think that the threat of Iran developing a nuclear weapon poses one of the greatest threats to security, not only to the Middle East, but to the world that we face today. Conferences like this give us the opportunity to be exposed to a wide variety of viewpoints on issues such as these negotiations. And as a Mainer, it also has given me the opportunity to raise a couple of issues with my Canadian friends that are of particular interest to the state of Maine. So I want to thank everyone for their hospitality and for an excellent conference.
I'm John Barrasso, United States Senator for Wyoming, and serve in the Senate on both the Foreign Relations Committee and the Energy Committee. And it's a privilege to be back here attending this conference again this year, where in addition to the issues and topics that my colleagues have talked about, I also focus on energy issues and the relationship between our countries with regard to energy. And it is a security issue. Energy independence for North America is part of not just our national security, but also our economic security, and it's a privilege to be back here with all of you again.
Well, thank you. I'm Congressman Adam Kinzinger. I represent the 16th District of Illinois, and I want to say to Senator McCain, Senator Kaine, thank you for leading this. Thank you for inviting me. To the forum, thanks for putting this on, and to the people of Halifax, they've been very hospitable. It's been an outstanding opportunity for me to come and talk to some very key players in global politics. I'm a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee as well, Senator, and I also serve on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. One of the concerns I have is, as we look at kind of an era where the West feels, in some cases, war-weary, I'm afraid that America and the West finds itself in retreat. I believe that when America retreats from the world, something has to fill that vacuum. And right now, it's chaos and confusion. So it's been a very good forum. It's been a great opportunity to hear from folks. But the thing that stood out to me the most is that people are still desperate and asking for American leadership around the globe. And I hope that's a message that gets out, and I hope that's one we can accommodate. So thank you.
Contrary to popular belief, Congressman Kinzinger is old enough to vote. Go ahead.
As of yesterday.
As I believe, so are you, sir.
Oh.
I just want to talk about the Iranian deal. I mean, we're hearing that it's probably fairly close. How adhesive is that going to be in your view?
I think it's going to be, it depends on, we don't know all the details, of course, but from what we know, that this would really not have a serious effect on slowing the path that Iran is clearly on towards developing a nuclear weapon. I think this would face significant resistance in the Congress of the United States. In fact, legislation is already being put together, which the majority leader has said would come directly to the floor when we get back in 2 weeks, the floor of the Senate. I think congressmen here would agree that it would have rapid passage through the House of Representatives as well. Our concern is obviously what is the Iranians' right to enrich? There should be none. The Iranians have deceived, they have lied, they have prevaricated for years and years and years. If they want a nuclear power plant, we'll get it for them. If they need nuclear materials for peaceful purposes, I'm sure that we could provide it to them. But in no way do I believe the Congress of the United States would be agreeable to any agreement that does not prohibit Iran from the right to enrich. And also, The commitment that may be made to eliminate the 20% enriched material, that's almost meaningless because we haven't stopped the centrifuges from spinning that would produce the 3.5% enrichment, which could be rapidly turned into fissionable material. And there are some 18,000 centrifuges that are spinning. As far as I know, there's no requirement for any of those centrifuges to stop spinning. Maybe one of my colleagues has. Do you?
If I could. Just to emphasize and maybe take a slightly different tack, I'm in the wait and see mode. I want to see what comes out of this deal that is not just a deal being negotiated by the United States, but by the P5+1, all of the countries. I think there are, let's begin with the fundamental proposition that we all share: Iran will not get a nuclear weapon, period. They're not going to have nuclear weapons. They're not going to have the capacity to develop nuclear weapons. And if they attempt to develop nuclear weapons, the United States and other nations will do everything we can to stop them. That is something that we all share. There are tactical questions. One is, can there be a phased deal that includes some interim steps before a final deal? There's differences of opinion about that. There are instances in the past where we've done phased deals of this kind that have worked well. There are arguments that in this instance it might not. It depends upon the particular components of the deal. As the deal gets put on the table, what I'm going to be looking at very carefully, and what I think all Congress needs to look at to kick the tires, is a couple of things. Does it preserve us on our position that Iran will not get nuclear weapons and enable us to continue to push to that position? Does any interim deal, if the deal is an interim one as it's being reported, slow Iran down, put significant time barriers that do not now exist between their current program and getting a nuclear weapon? Does it improve and increase intrusive inspections regime so we will know more quickly whether they are attempting to break forward toward a nuclear weapon? These are the kinds of things that we'll grapple with. But as Senator McCain said, I think it's highly likely that when we return from recess that Congress will put on the table our own set of thoughts about whatever deal might be announced and ongoing what the sanctions should be. I want to see that and engage in a dramatic tire-kicking exercise. But the notion of a phased deal is one that is something that I would want us to be open to because similar deals have been successful in the past.
I just get a supplementary in here, if you
Sure.
don't mind. I just want to move slightly southwest.
By the way, could I also
Sure,
add, the outlines of this agreement as we know it are in violation of the 4 UN Security Council resolutions, which call for the removal of all fissionable material from Iran, and this agreement would be in violation of those Security Council resolutions. Go ahead.
Thanks, Senator. I just wanted to move slightly southwest to Afghanistan. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, and perhaps anybody else who would like to comment on it, do you believe that a deal is possible with Karzai, especially after what he has been saying publicly? Is there an appetite to reach a deal with Karzai for 2014?
President Karzai tries the patience of all of us. President Karzai, again, made some very unnecessary remarks about a raid that recently took place, as well as this idea that somehow it would be up to his successor to sign an agreement. Those are non-starters with the president and with us. We are united with the president on this issue. The big question in my mind is, what are the troop levels, and will they be able to carry out sufficiently a mission that would ensure peace and security in Afghanistan? And that number has ranged from 13,000 down to 9 or 10 plus NATO forces. We have yet to see what that number is, and I think that's going to be a critical item in whether we can actually succeed in U.S. and NATO presence in Afghanistan. Finally, none of us want to see the mistake that was made in Iraq, where we got out completely, and we have seen Iraq unravel since then.
Senator McCain, Chris Sims of Sun News Network. We just finished watching a very interesting, sorry about that, Chris Sims of Sun News Network here in Canada. We just finished watching a very interesting panel on the use of robots and drones.
Unlike the panel that I was on.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry,
Yes, I understand.
we're here in a pen, so
There you
we
go.
watch what we're told to watch. So we were able to watch one on drones and robot technology and warfare. As both a lawmaker and a veteran yourself, how concerned are you about the human factor being taken out of this? We just heard from a brilliant man from MIT saying this isn't happening tomorrow, it's right now, that not only can technology replicate itself, that it's starting to be able to think for itself. Are we going into a problem time where robots are killing people, and where does the human factor come in there, please?
We are, and it's very difficult for me to give you a short answer, but it's one thing for the United States of America, I think very legitimately, to use drones to take out those who are obviously committed to attacking the United States of America and doing whatever damage they can. It's something else for someone, let's say, my friend Vladimir Putin, to decide there's some people in Chechnya that deserve to be taken out because they too, in his mind, are terrorists. We're going to have an international discussion about this whole issue. And yes, it's much easier to kill people from a distance than it is in the conventional ways that we've grown accustomed to. And this technology, like every technology since the crossbow, will spread. And in the hands of the wrong people with the wrong motives, there's very little doubt that they can do things that they were not capable of in the past. And I appreciate that panel and the discussion. There's got to be a national and international discussion about the use of these drones, because with that capability in the hands of the wrong people, we could see some really bad things happen.
Do we need an international agreement to
Yes,
on the rules
international agreements are the beginning of it, and perhaps to start with a discussion at the UN on the whole issue, or perhaps even convening an international conference. This is a new method of warfare. It crosses international boundaries, it goes long distances, it reaches places that you could never reach under any other circumstances. The constraint of a manned aircraft being shot down by the enemy has been removed. We know how important the individual lives of our pilots and crew are, which constrains a lot of activities. Those restraints are all gone.
Could I just add an element to the answer? And Senator McCain has been a leader on armed services on another topic related to drones. The question you asked was sort of about the need for some international convention or agreement or study of the question. But we also have our own issues internally. We've grappled with, for example, the continuing validity of the precise language of the 9/1801 authorization for use of military force. Many of the strikes that are taking place right now that the U.S. is conducting, and I actually think the technology that in the way we use it minimizes collateral damage in some appropriate ways, but the policy of how and when the strikes will be used is something that we probably really need to grapple with, especially as we're negotiating a status of force agreement for the end of sort of combat involvement in Afghanistan. Senator McCain and I and others on armed services and foreign relations have started to talk about the analysis of that language, and is there a way in sort of post-2014 that we should look at it. And that would obviously affect, however we would adjust the authorization, would also affect how drones would be used in furtherance of the authorization. So we have some important internal issues to resolve on that as well.
Thank you. One more.
Jane Tabor from the Globe and Mail, and Senator McCain, I liked your panel better than the drone panel, so there you go. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Just to be clear. I want to ask about...
I'd like you to contact my mother. And
well, okay, I'll do that, and
Appreciate
I'll tweet it
Thank
as
you.
well, okay?
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about energy and to find out what's happening with Keystone. It's a big issue here in Canada, and one that seems to be...
I have two experts, one a doctor who's not a very good doctor, but he does know a lot about energy, and also Congressman.
Okay, thank you.
I specifically asked that question of the president. The last time he came and spoke at the Republican conference, he said he would make a decision by the end of the year. I'm still waiting to hear that decision. He has been somewhat dismissive of it in comments in the press, talking about the number of jobs that he said it would create is really a low-ball number, a number much lower than even his own State Department has said that this would provide. On votes in the Senate with regard to the budget and a test vote, if you will, there is a supermajority of members of the Senate. It's a bipartisan group who support the Keystone XL pipeline. It's important, I think, for the economy of both countries. It's important in terms of jobs, productivity, quality of life, and I would ask the President to approve it as soon as possible, if not as soon as today.
Yeah, if you want to get me fired up, talk about two things, foreign policy and Keystone and energy. So let me say it is high time that we approve the Keystone pipeline. This is a benefit to both our good friends up here in the north and ourselves. The House of Representatives at the end of the week, last week, in fact, passed a bill that would do just that. It would declare that any pipeline application that's not approved or disapproved within 12 months would be deemed approved to basically light a fire under the administration or anybody at that route to go ahead and approve or disapprove a pipeline. This has been far too long. For the environment, we need to create this pipeline because right now the oil is coming down, but it's coming on trucks and trains, and it's much more efficient to the environment if we put it in a pipeline, and it's the right thing to do. So I think over the next few months, you're going to see at least the majority in the House of Representatives really ramp up efforts to get the American public once again screaming about the issue of Keystone, and we hope to have this finally resolved soon enough. But I've said that many times over my last 3 years in Congress, so hopefully this time it really comes to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman.
Could I just also add again, the way the fuel is being transported now, either by rail or truck, there is a danger of accidents. And we are making the argument on the grounds of safety that a pipeline is by far the safest way to transport this material, not only cheaper. And I remember and paid close attention when a member of the Canadian government said that if they didn't have a pipeline that goes north-south, they may build one that goes east-west. And I think that we Americans should understand that. Okay?
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.